Okay, it is 3:30 UK time. Thank you very much for joining. My name is Ben McLeish, and today we are taking a whistle-stop tour through mainly two new large features that Altmetric has released and is releasing to its customers. I have helpfully divided these out into the two listed shortly. Very quickly, in case you're not familiar with Altmetric, we belong to the digital science group. That is now 13 very small, agile startup style companies that deal with research data, research management, the research process itself, all the way down to robotics for labs and Internet of Things for labs and things like that. I bring that up because today that actually does um, uh, serve an important purpose in explaining one of the features of Altmetric, because it crosses over into one of our other systems, Dimensions. And so just so you're aware, we are within the digital science ecosystem today, rather than just the Altmetric Explorer itself. Altmetric itself has been going for a while, founded in 2011, so we are 8 years old, I believe. Yeah, now in December, it's most likely already been the birthday of Altmetric. And it was founded by a researcher who himself was finding quite a hard time in collecting all the attention together for research that he had done so that he could take credit for it. And we first launched a platform for publishers so that publishers could see all the publications that they had created and all the cumulative attention that's received. It was almost a form of a dashboard for their social engagement as an entity. And then the request came that we would do the same kind of thing for academics, for institutions that wanted to see their departments, their researchers broken down by the internal structures that they had so that they could quantify their footprint outside of simple media monitoring. So we are capturing where research itself is referred to or linked, even if they don't mention any keywords that you would expect them to. And that does seem to be the case very often. I have found tweets about research that contain the phrase, "this is cool," and nothing else. And of course, it's because we are able to detect that the link that they're sharing does actually resolve ultimately to a piece of research, that we are able to capture it and then show it in the dashboard. We've done various other developments since then. You'll notice 2018 and 19 is missing from this because we have covered them elsewhere, and because I'll be covering really the main two for 2019 today, but that's us. So today, the latest developments, the two that I'll talk about and will demo for you as well. I'm on a safe home web connection. There's me touching wood in the background to make sure that stays the same. We have released something called the Mention Sources tab. This is a new tab in the Explorer that goes to the question of that has often been asked by our customers, and that is, well, who are our main engaging accounts? Who are the people speaking about our research the most, even if they don't know that it's always research from our institution or from my research as a researcher? I mean, I want to see the people who are sharing the most about my research, or indeed about any research, as I'll show you today. It'll update for any search that you have done, any set of items you're looking at, any particular time span for mentions or publications, so that you can see the loudest voices, the places where you're having the greatest impact. And in the second instance, I'll then show you the integration we've built with the Dimension service from Digital Science as well, because that actually opens the door, especially for UK customers in the next year or two, for quantifying the social audience for particular ref units of assessment, for example. I'll show you one that I built earlier. So there, what we're really focusing on today. So the frequent requests we had that led us to the mention sources item is mostly quantified by the two examples I've put here. Institutions would ask us, who are our key opinion leaders? In fact, it's not just academic institutions. Most vocally, corporate customers want to know within a given field. Let's say we're looking at publications in oncology or within some sort of other discipline, mathematics, law, physics. We would like to know who is the key opinion leader for that very specific field, or for a set of results that come from a search for, let's say, CRISPR-Cas9 gene editing, or biotechnology, or something like that. And researchers themselves wanted to know, who are the people who are discussing my research the most, who I should definitely be following on social media, networking with, perhaps reviewing their other publications and their online presence, so that I can strengthen my network. These were questions that have been asked in the 5 years that I've been working here, almost every single time that I've demoed our service to people. And so we have produced, launching over the next few weeks, it's live in some accounts already, the Mention Sources tab. Sits quite nicely right next to the Mentions tab and the Journals tab, and behaves a little bit like this. So I can hop into the Explorer. The front page, which shows me, typically at the moment, I'm looking at my pretend university, Lilliput University, the sort of university we created in order to show how this behaves for a typical institution with departments and researchers. This sort of shows me my dashboard of things that are going on. I can go and have a look at things like research outputs. I can go and order them by high to low attention, by high to low patent references or policy document references. And sitting over here is then this Mentions tab, which then shows me at the moment the top engagement accounts, I suppose, for the entire institution. So I can see there is a Linda Snyder 2015 Twitter account has mentioned research from our institution 1,000 times. Because it's a Twitter account, we can show the follow account as well. I can see some of the recent mentions as well. It will show me the ones that have appeared recently. And because this is a slightly older data set, these only date back to 2015. If I were to look at a real customer, or indeed just do a random search for something that brings back publications that are more recent, we're of course going to find a different set of items and a different set of voices that are talking about them. I can order these differently. I could say, I would like actually the highest Twitter follow account to show first. And it'll then take me over to this field where I can then see the mentioned sources being searched with the 114,000 mentions now being collated and aggregated together so that they then come out in the order of the accounts that actually have the highest follow account, not necessarily the ones that have actually spoken to us the most. It's taking a bit of a while there. It will eventually get there. It does have to do this kind of stuff in real time. We don't preload this kind of stuff. Now, the upshot of this, aside from understanding at a university level or a full institutional level what it's like in terms of my audience, is you can drill this down as well. You can drill down to particular researchers, or in, I suppose, our case, we can go to a particular department. These are departments that will have been given to us by our customers. They'll give us a list, or we'll connect to one of their on-site repositories or their current research information system and just simply mirror the structure for them of their own research. So I could, for example, go and look at the 1,368 outputs that are officially part of the School for Social Sciences at this made-up university. And I can go and, again, I will see now everything in the same tabs that I saw before, but over in the Mention Sources tab, this is now adapted. It's still admittedly the same account that has appeared here the most, but we can now see some of the other attention that this School of Social Sciences has courted, including NBER, the policy source. There's a Google Plus user. The Conversation has mentioned this department's data 119 times, and I could go and click on those and receive those 119 mentions from actually 108 individual posts, which means that some of these posts will have referred to more than one publication at the same time. You can see the items that actually officially belong to this institution always are ticked, and then there are usually several others that we concatenate. We sort of shorten it so that you can see the post without having to look through what can be sometimes an enormously long list. Especially within policy, you can get 200-300 references within that one document, of which yours are maybe one or two, but we do always show the ones that really do belong to this institution, which our customers have declared to us belong to them, always sat at the top. And if I were to go further down, I would eventually find, there it is, I'll find the ones where this is where there's an example of actually 2 items among 12 that belong to us from the Conversation, which is one of our top engaging sources. This can inform a different kind of strategy for outreach. If you are consistently hitting a high engagement on specific news sites, specific blogs, specific Twitter accounts, these are places to include in your network, to follow, to watch, to reach out to when there are new publications out there. And that's true whether you're a researcher, whether you're the communications and PR manager for a particular institution, and so forth. So you can do that as well. And you could make it even broader. I could move away from my institution and search the full Altmetric database. I've cleared my departments. I'm looking now at just anything that's out there. And I could say, well, if we just search for CRISPR in the title and the abstract of items and receive back the results that we have, there are something like 4,600 publications that have that word in the title of the abstract that have had attention in the world. We're now looking very, very generally around the world. Now, the top voices are, of course, completely different. Some of them automated, so CRISPR papers, CRISPR articles, very likely are bots. These are automatic distribution mechanisms which have been set up. Science CRISP probably is as well, and Virtual Doc 3000 might well be a real person. We can go and have a look at their accounts themselves. We can find out very quickly. Seeking cures for disease, tweets on my own. That sounds like a real person to me. So this person is sharing quite a lot of data around research, and you will eventually, there's one, for example. So lots of ability to find somebody who doesn't necessarily have a huge profile. So these people are very, very focused in who they're following and who's following them, but they evidently have immense amounts of engagement with research. Their core business, I would say, if it's this number with just the word CRISPR, so the CRISPR papers, if they're already hitting 1,200 mentions, these people, that account is sharing an enormous amount of research out there. So it's interesting to see the balance between the audience and that they have and the amount of research that they are sharing in an extremely sort of efficient way. So that is our mentioned sources tab. Easy to see who are those key opinion leaders, who are people that we may want to invite to a conference, who are people that we want to reach out to or engage with or note when we're looking at a particular research area, a particular department, particular researchers, or if I've gone and simply uploaded 20,000 identifiers that all belong to a particular discipline that I'm interested in, I can then, in addition to having things like demographics and seeing the timeline of when these mentions happened, I can see those loudest voices right away. So that's our mentioned sources tab. Pretty fun, keenly awaited for many years by our customers. The second set of frequent requests were things that Altmetric couldn't implement by itself. So, for example, you will have noticed in my previous search, I'm searching the title and the abstract of the data that's in Altmetric, because Altmetric doesn't contain full text, it doesn't contain the publications, it simply contains records for things that have been talked about online. Items, whether they're book chapters, data sets, publications, that have an identifier to them, whether it's a DOI or a PubMed ID or an archive ID that we have found. People have always asked, oh, can we do a full text search? You know, that would be really great to do that. And can I see, I mean, we've as an institution have given you our list of authors and their publications and the departments they belong to, but what if I want to search John Smith, this particular researcher from outside our institution? I'd like to be able to see what they have sort of published and what might be talked about with them. And more recently, people have said, well, what about with things like units of assessment or other groupings of items that aren't going to be native to things like the Altmetric Explorer? Is there a way that I can, for example, just search countries, so publications that happen to come from the Netherlands or from Germany or whatever? That again is not something that we can search directly in the Altmetric Explorer. And happily, we ended up building a native integration with Dimensions instead. So the Dimensions service does contain a lot of full text, does contain significant amounts of abstracts and so forth. And so what we've done here is we have created the ability that when the publication count in the results set of the search ends up at 25,000 items or less, you can then, with one click of a button, open that in the Altmetric Explorer. And this opens quite a interesting dynamic into the ability to do very advanced searches and then receive the Altmetric attention for it. So I've stuck with CRISPR before. We had, what was it, 4,500 items, something like that, where the word was in the text. There are, if we were to search the entire publication corpus of the world, something like 87,693 publications. That is searched in full text. The difference between title and abstract and full text is notable. So if you were to rerun that with just looking in the title and the abstract, you do of course get a shorter amount of results, a much smaller set. So I'll move back to the larger one. So we go from 19,900 to 87,693. Shows how much that phrase really does come up in articles and publications that don't necessarily have it in the title or the abstract. Now, of course, 87,000 is too much to take into the Altmetric Explorer. This button here would become something other than grayed out when we reach the level that we need. So we could filter by publication year. Usefully, 2018 seems to be one that is most recent, that has below 25,000 items. It really does show you actually the significant buildup of CRISPR as a discipline. There are even some preprints in 2020 already. But if I select that one and limit to publications from 2018 in CRISPR, I'm then able, with one click, to essentially export and navigate across to the Altmetric Explorer, where it'll then build that for me. So it'll specify exactly what's been looked for. So the dimensions query is CRISPR, it's searched in the full data, that's the publication year. And I then have a more controlled literature search and the resulting publications that have had attention. Now, these numbers are different, of course, to where we started with CRISPR publications, and that simply comes from the fact that not everything about CRISPR has been mentioned online. If I were to go down this results set and keep going, eventually I'd find items that have perhaps some citations, or perhaps as yet no citations, but have not actually been mentioned on Altmetric. There are some in here that simply haven't translated into attention for the general public, so to speak, on the various platforms. So that's why those 21,000 items actually translate to about 13,577 that have had some attention. Now, again, I could go back to my mention sources tab and see again, who is it who's talking about here. Now, a lot of it is automatic. Here is probably a real person. There is a blog, actually, that is extensively written about CRISPR. So we're seeing the 600 mentions of items published last year that have shown up there. So that is an easy way to sort of see what's going on. I'm just checking. Making sure that people can see. Yep, okay. There is a question there that I'll answer shortly. So now we're getting to see some of the other attention that's happening here for a very particular controlled search. We can even go and have a look at now the demographics. So we're now seeing demographics that have interacted with publications that came from last year that mention CRISPR somewhere in the article, whether it's in the full text, whether it's in the title or the abstract. So there's our cumulative Twitter audience, our cumulative Facebook posts from public pages. We can see how they break down. These are all clickable maps, so I could, for example, go and have a look at the news spread and say, oh, that's interesting. Let's have a look at the news stories from India for 2018 CRISPR data. And there it is. I can go and export that. I can now drill down very quickly to the effect that is that these publications have had. But general searches aside, one thing that we've implemented in Dimensions that sort of gets inherited into the Altmetric Explorer a little bit is the way that we group articles, or we group content. We have implemented now 9 different category systems from around the world. So whether this is the Australia-New Zealand Fields of Research, which will give you an idea about the content that's in there, we are grouping that via machine learning. So the machine learning and AI tool is reading the abstract and is then categorizing it based on a training set that we've got from before. So it's working out that something is in the biological sciences or chemical sciences. There are other category systems like the RCDC from the NIH, so heavily health-based, of course, very, very specific. And then we added recently things like units of assessment. So we could right now have a look at the social impact that a certain unit of assessment has had for a certain university. And we can do this, ironically, globally, even though the ref is only a UK exercise that's happening next year. So we have applied these units of assessment to everything in the system rather than just the publications that come from UK institutions. Now, institutions do get a bit sensitive, I think, about us showing their impact data on a predefined unit of assessment level. So I'm going to use an American institution for this. So I will choose, let's start filtering publication year. I'm going to choose pretty much everything that one would expect for a ref exercise. Let's just pick the last 5 years. I know that's not absolutely accurate, but it is a set of years. So we're now looking at 23 million publications, which come from those last 5 years. And I'm going to choose a unit of assessment, let's say clinical medicine. That sounds pretty good. So it's not the biggest one. So we're down to 1.8 million items worldwide that do translate to clinical medicine. And I'm going to also choose a research organization. I think probably, wait, let's pick the biggest one. So Johns Hopkins University. This, of course, could be, I could type in Cambridge or Oxford or Bristol or York or whatever. I'll just simply choose these guys. So I now have, theoretically, a ref result for Johns Hopkins University. I think that's never been really done before. So we now have 16,700 publications in a specific unit of assessment for a specific university. It could be yours, could be somebody else's. And I can then take that straight through to the Altmetric Explorer as well. And it'll have a bit of a think to itself, and it'll sort of build the query for us. And we then have of those potential results, so of the actual output of Johns Hopkins in a particular discipline, in a particular unit of assessment for the last 5 years, including the preprints of 2020, 11,714 items that actually do have some attention. Interestingly, the top accounts that appear to be referring to this is almost all press releases. We can see some of their co-affiliations, Massachusetts General, Harvard University, not a surprise at all, where they're published and so forth, the top items. We can then go and see the timeline of the attention. So when these particular items were mentioned, we can see how much it breaks down for us. There's 270 policy mentions, a lot of Twitter, bit of peer review, Wikipedia use as well, pretty interesting to look at. And I can, of course, change that timeline so that I can have a look at very specific. At the moment, we're looking at months, but if I keep going, it'll eventually break down into individual days. Tuesday, November 12th, 2019. What were the 3 Wikipedia mentions for, what was it, Johns Hopkins, for this particular set of data that we searched? So it gives me the ALS association, which refers to this item, and these various other ones as well that refer to actually 3 different publications that are there as well. And of course, back to our mentioned sources, we can now see there are those 3 that we saw before, a lot of publications, a lot of Science Daily, and then we all of a sudden can see things like highly interactive Facebook pages, where a Facebook page is very commonly talking about items that come from this particular institution. Particular bots, like I said, evidence robot is here, and then that's most likely a Twitter account belonging to one of the journals. And then we're getting some of these guys like Dale Needham, Dr. Dale Needham, who has a large follow account, and we can have a look at some of his recent mentions as well, the recent tweets. He has been, like I promised, tweeting more recently than 2015. We're looking at 27th of last month, and we can see some of the other items. We can even see the tweets themselves, and of course, by clicking, we'll get to that individual tweet as well. So very, very easy to quantify the dissemination associated with a particular unit of assessment. It could be particular researchers. I haven't done that search yet, actually. I could do that. And then we can see where they're being picked up. And in fact, here, Dale Needham is actually retweeting the ICU Rehab Lab at Johns Hopkins, of course. So that's one of the explanations for why he is showing up here. He probably is following this particular account, is certainly interacting with it. And we could go and see, of course, works at Johns Hopkins himself. So there we are. Now we're getting, you can tell I didn't click on every single Twitter account here. So we're now finding some of the people who are really driving the research from Johns Hopkins into the open. Luckily, some of the people who work there themselves, he's presumably sharing his own work as well as the work that belongs to the unit he works for. There are hashtags you can now begin to monitor as well. This person maintains their account very well, actually. So interesting stuff to see. We could try, like I said before, one of the queries used to be, could we do a background author search? Could we do a controlled search for an author's name? Since Dimensions has done a lot of the work for us already, so that we can search by researchers, for example, I am wondering with some of these guys, let's pick somebody who's got an enormous amount of publications to their name. It could be, yep, there is some attention here. It could be, well, that this person doesn't have a huge Altmetric audience, because people with extremely high volume outputs sometimes are extremely technical. It doesn't necessarily mean that they are referred to online all that often. Yes, I was right. This person is doing extremely exacting chemistry work, and there are a lot of book chapters as well. Let's try somebody else. I did have a sense that might be the case. But if not, what I'll do is I'll actually select a few different, just so you can get an idea for this actually. So why don't we pick a few of these folks, and let's see what happens. We're still under 25,000 items, so I can easily jump over into the AllMetric Explorer and get those results shown. I'm just going to close a couple of these tabs. It does open a new tab for you every time, which is useful if you're needing to do multiple comparative searches. You will have them running in the same Explorer tab at the same time. So it'll be now building that interface for those 3 items. Hey, that was pretty quick, actually, very impressive. So yes, we're looking at 1,200 items, 6,500 mentions, again on the low side, because, like I say, high volume authors are normally within extremely technical papers. It's not a surprise, but we do actually have some decent amount of stuff to be getting on with here. We have quite a lot of attention. We can see right away what are their top items. This is very useful if you've just done a search on a single person, which we can always pretend we have done. We can see the timeline of their attention. Are they in the prime of their online fame? 2019, probably a little bit lower for these guys. Could well be that they hadn't published anything this year. But you can see absolute bumper year for these 3 researchers last year. We can drill down into that right away. A lot of stuff on neural networks, that makes sense as well. A lot of AI researchers are extremely high volume. And so you can start to see sort of where these individual researchers are getting picked up and so forth. It can be quite interesting to save this as a search. With really any search you can execute in the Dimension system, whether it's a set of different research organizations, whether it's a set of years that we've defined by, whether it's units of assessment, I can then save that search for this particular, let's say, unit of assessment or these particular researchers, and then crowbar that into a daily, weekly, or monthly email, or all 3, so that I can keep up to date on the attention that a particular researcher, a particular topic, a particular unit of assessment has received. We did all of this by a much easier form of integration with another system, rather than having to somehow build this natively once more into the Altmetric system. So hopefully that's given you a quick overview. That is a cheeky half hour, as they say, within a simple set of slides. I did have a question. You can submit questions, by the way. There's a Q&A button there. There is also a chat function. I'll accept both, just this once. One of the questions I had was, is there any cross activity with ResearchGate's system? This is, I suppose, the 3rd most requested thing. ResearchGate and academia.edu do not have APIs, not that anybody can use anyway. I think that's probably by design. Certainly ResearchGate has always prided itself on being a walled garden. So we can't interact with ResearchGate data as the users would like. It tends to live separately on there. So we can't see when people are saving items or sharing items on there. It has been something that people have inquired about for the last few years. I think if you were to actually search, is there an API for ResearchGate, there was a Quora question. I suppose it stands for question or answer. I've never been sure. Quora, the place where you can create questions online, where one of the co-founders of ResearchGate actually answers and says they're working on one. And that was in 2013, I believe it was. So if they are working on it, it's proving to be the hardest of all projects to create. So at the moment, unfortunately, we can't capture attention or interactions from ResearchGate just yet. If and when they do have an API, we would certainly look at the feasibility of including something like that, certainly. Yeah. Any other questions from people? If not, I hope that's been of some use. If you are a customer of ours, you are most likely going to see this switched on for you at some point. And if you are a Dimensions customer and want to have us run over this feature as well, again, that is for mutual customers, so you tend to have both systems. Otherwise, we don't tease you with it and then say, oh, you need a subscription to AllMetric for that. We do tend to only make it visible by deliberate design, like it is something that we switch on for people when they have both systems. You can then begin to use that interoperability that now extends further than just seeing individual badges or seeing some of the metrics you see in the analytical view as well. So with that, I think I'm just going to have one more check and see. Yep, I think there are no other questions. Thank you very much for joining. I hope it's been useful. There'll be a recording and slides distributed shortly. You can reach us at @altmetric on Twitter is probably the best place for it. And yeah, thank you again, and hope you have a wonderful rest of the day.